Is the 2026 class a disappointment? I mean, after all, Penn State doesn't even have a five-star prospect committed, at least not yet.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked on to Penn State football recruiting. And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day, your daily source for all things Penn State sports. My name is Seyko, and I am your host of the show, credentialed media member for both Penn State football and Penn State wrestling. Today's show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. A thank you to the everydayers for making us a part of your regular routine by being subscribed to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. Friendly reminder to be active down in the comments section. Be a part of this conversation as we are talking about a five-star prospect being committed to Penn State in the class of 2026, and that player is already a member of the Nittany Lions. But the 2026 class has been somewhat of a disappointment. We're going to talk about that in the show, plus what to expect next for Penn State. Pending commitments, prospects that are interested, where this 2026 class is headed over the next couple of weeks, next month, the outlook there to finish things up. But in this same conversation to open up the show about a pending five-star commitment for Penn State is also talking about the other prospects that are committed that will see in due time a boost in the recruiting rankings, beginning with that five-star player. He is the headline prospect. He is the face of this class of 2026. He's been committed for a long time, and that's offensive lineman Kevin Brown. I wish I had intel that indicated that, hey, Penn State is going to get a five-star commitment from Emmanuel Iheanacho, or maybe they are able to flip somebody like a Carter Meadows or a Joey O'Brien. And at this time, I don't have anything like that. You know, who knows if anything changes in the middle of the season. Iheanacho is giving Penn State due respect here. But at the end, when all of this is finalized, Kevin Brown, Penn State will at least have one five-star in this class of 2026, which they seem to routinely do. They get at least one five-star prospect, whether that's Malachi Goodman the year before, or Luke Reynolds the year before that, Penn State, and then that 2022 class that had Drew Allard, Denai Dennis Sutton, and Nicholas Singleton. Penn State is always guaranteed at least one five-star prospect, it seems. And Kevin Brown is the latest player to be just that. Well, he has respect at the moment. Consensus, he's just outside of the top 50. He's listed as, this is per On3, listed as a top 3 interior offensive lineman. I'm eager to see where he plays. If he ends up at tackle, if he ends up at guard for Penn State, and he's either the number 1 or number 2 player in Pennsylvania. That other player is Joey O'Brien. They're a 1A and 1B, I would think, depending on who you ask. I mean, Kevin Brown is number 1 to some people. Joey O'Brien's number 1 to some people. But Brown, why is he a 4-star? Why do the recruiting rankings have him as, you know, a higher end 4-star? Where is he missing that 5th star from? Is it just he's missing something in his technique? You know, it's a lack of size for his frame as an offensive lineman. What is it about Kevin Brown? It's actually none of that. It's the fact that he's dealt with an injury over the course of his junior season. Not recently. He's all healed up. He's good. He's shown it at the showcases recently why he is a 5-star prospect. But Brown missed a majority of his junior season at Harrisburg. And this goes back to a conversation that maybe people remember, that we've talked about the recruiting rankings and what they are. They can only go off of what they see. So those private skills camps that Penn State has, unless it's a public showcase or high school film, the scouts can only judge what they see. So this isn't necessarily to condemn the recruiting rankings, but they are behind because they're going off of sophomore highlights and maybe a showcase here and there from before. But until recently down in Florida, where there was, I think it was a Rivals skills camp, Kevin Brown wasn't able to truly show off that ability to On3, 24/7, now Rival, On3 and Rivals have merged now officially. But those 3 entities and ESPN as well, the scouts that decide these recruiting rankings didn't have the intel to say, okay, this guy's a 5-star, but now he's giving it to them. Because it's not a lack of technique. It's not a lack of size, football IQ, or anything. All of those things are what is going to give Kevin Brown the evidence, the credence to be given that 5th star. So in due time, when the recruiting rankings finally update across the board, when On3, Rivals, 24/7, ESPN all give an update, Kevin Brown should be a consensus 5-star and will be that 5-star prospect committed in this class of 2026. And it's all of those things that I mentioned. The speed, the acceleration, the footwork. There is very little that I could critique about his game at this point in time. It is all polished. It looks college ready. He's 6'5". He's 260. He'll definitely add to that frame. He could probably, that's what he's listed at. He could easily go up to, I imagine 290, 300 pounds. That's why I'm eager to see, where does he play? Does he play tackle? Because he plays tackle right now. But could he be better suited as a guard at Penn State? But he's college ready. And at this recent showcase, at this recent skills camp, Brown was manhandling other comparable prospects. Are they pending 5-stars or have 5-star potential? No, not necessarily, but these are respectable prospects. These are high-end 4-stars. And there was a noticeable talent gap between that defensive end and Kevin Brown going up in these one-on-one drills, and Brown was winning decisively. I think one of the notable things was the hand placement, and I actually want to give credit to Landon Tangwall for pointing this out, and he should be able to identify this, being a former Penn State offensive lineman in his own right. But he pointed this out on X Twitter, that Brown, with the hand placement, it was basically a fake jab to force the defensive end to go one way, and it was basically a trap to get him to do a move that allowed Kevin Brown to make an easier block. And it's those little techniques that are high football IQ that are, okay, you know what to expect from the defensive end. You're able to counter it, and then you have the strength, the speed, the stamina to fend off any sort of counters yourself. And Brown's technique, 5-star, athleticism, 5-star. Would he play right away at Penn State? I mean, we'll see. I think there's a very good chance he ends up on the 2-deep depth chart. Penn State's just so loaded at offensive line, even with losing potentially 4 starters after this upcoming season. Basically, Cooper Cousins and Anthony Donko are going to be returning for this up after that in 2026. So there's an opportunity for Brown to at least make a case for himself to start right away. But I don't want to just talk about Kevin Brown here, because Brown's not the only one that's going to see a boost in the recruiting rankings. No, there are plenty of other players for Penn State that will see a jump, and then it will give Penn State a better standing in the national rankings as a team and everything else. So Kevin Brown is just one of a handful of players that will see that due respect that they deserve. Another player that I want to immediately mention is Jahsiear Rogers. The fact that Rogers is a 3-star prospect, according to any site at this point in time, it's disrespectful. It is a travesty. He will be a consensus 4-star. I can't go and say he has 5-star athleticism. I will say that when it comes to his skill set, he definitely has 5-star athleticism. But the criticism that would generally probably, if I asked a scout, said, hey, what is Rogers missing? Well, they would question his competition right now at the high school level. But that's the thing. He's doing all of these similar things against comparable talent at these skills camps that Penn State hosts, at these 7-on-7s, where these are other 4-star prospects, other 5-stars that are competing in these 7-on-7 leagues. So it's not like Rogers can't handle the competition. He will be a consensus 4-star. Brian Smith gave him the due respect and ranked him as a top 12 slot wide receiver in the entire country. So I think that's fair. I still think that's a little low. I definitely think he's within the top 10, 7 or 8, somewhere in that range. But Rogers will and should be a consensus 4-star, and potentially could be a top 150 player across the board when all said and done, when he finally gets that due respect. Somebody else out of the state of Delaware, I think Isaac Chukura eventually will see a bump in the rankings as well. Defensive lineman, will be a defensive tackle for Penn State out of the state of Delaware. He's currently as a 3-star, was completely unranked up and before his commitment. Nobody had any information about him. Penn State takes that commitment from Chukura, and he's listed as a fringe 3-star across the board. Alex Haskell is somebody else that just has so much athleticism, is able to bully any offensive lineman, and he's rated as a lower 3-star. There's a reason Michigan really wanted his commitment, and it seemed like that the Wolverines were very confident that they could land him. He is somebody that will see a boost in the recruiting rankings. And then a few of the defensive back prospects as well. Amari Polidor. Polidor has been facing weaker competition in the state of Maryland, but now he's transferred into the powerhouse in the state of Maryland when it comes to high school football, St. Francis Academy. He will be playing comparable competition. Now, ESPN does have him listed as a 4-star, but everywhere else it's a 3-star. He'll be a consensus 4-star by the time the rankings are finalized. Same thing with fellow defensive back Jahsiear Hart. Hart was another one of those players, very underrated out of the state of Virginia. But Penn State takes these commitments for a reason. Just because the recruiting rankings say one thing, Penn State does its own independent scouting. And when they go to these Penn State, when they go for their visits, they do the testing, they do the measurables, they do football drills. They don't just hang out for the entire weekend. No, they do a lot of football related activities, but it also plays into what Penn State is looking for with its scouting, with its recruitment. And it's why they take these commitments, because typically after that, after Penn State holds a camp or some sort, they see, oh, this guy's flying under the radar. Let's take his commitment now before the recruiting rankings catch up. So like I said, there are a handful of players that we'll see that I am extremely confident in. Come back to this episode, and all of these players that I named here will see a boost in their rankings and a lot more respect in due time. But the 2026 class, okay, well, that's great that these players are going to see that jump in the rankings, but it's still disappointing. Still disappointing. Top 15 class at the moment, and I'm here saying that it's a disappointment. Well, let me explain why. That is coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Do you ever wish managing your money felt easier? Well, it can with Monarch Money. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just another budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Now, for me personally, I want to be able to continue to grow my savings, and Monarch Money allows me to do just that by being able to track my purchases, manage subscriptions, something like a specific category, something like subscriptions. You can monitor those with ease, and you also get to manage finances with more than just yourself. If you manage finances with a partner, Monarch is seamless in the way that you handle your money. Now, you can do all of that too. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for, get this, 50% off your first year. That is right, 50% off your first year over at monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. The 2026 cycle has been disappointing because this isn't to be critical of the prospects that are committed to Penn State. I think it's how the cycle has gone mostly. And specifically, it's not just about losing out on the prospects. It's about who Penn State has lost them to. For the 2026 class, Pennsylvania was pretty loaded up. I thought there was a lot of talent in the state of Pennsylvania. And for the most part, Penn State did at least admirable in getting the commitments that they wanted to. But Notre Dame and Michigan, those two schools in particular, it's not like they lost a recruit here, they lost another recruit there, they lost this to a Georgia, and then, I don't know, start throwing out some other schools, a Texas or in Arizona, just where all these different schools individually. It wasn't even mostly Ohio State. Okay, Ohio State's somewhat understandable, right? The Buckeyes have been at the top of the Big Ten. They're defending national champions, but it was Notre Dame, and then Notre Dame again, and then Notre Dame after that, and then no breather in between. Michigan, and then Michigan again, and then Michigan a third time, and pending right at the point of this conversation, there are still some prospects that haven't verbally committed, but all signs, all intel point that Penn State is going to lose specific players. Travis Johnson, a wide receiver that they had for an official visit, somebody that they definitely wanted in this class, and Dorian Barney, definitely a player just across the board, regardless of position, that they wanted in this class. And they're projected to the Wolverines. Carter Meadows just recently committed to the Wolverines. Marky Walbridge, an offensive lineman that they definitely wanted to pivot to, with Emmanuel Iheanacho not being guaranteed, and more than just that, definitely, I would say Penn State's third in that recruitment behind LSU and Oregon, just based on what Iheanacho has recently said about how he has admitted that Oregon's the top school, LSU's not too far behind, and then Penn State wasn't really mentioned in that quote. So that's how I read that. But you lose these recruitments to these schools, and there was no split. It's not like Penn State won one and Notre Dame won two, Michigan won a couple, and then Penn State at least got one, right? I guess you could make that case for Jackson Ford and Messiah Mickens, for example. Mickens never flipped. Notre Dame was certainly pushing for him, and he never flipped. So I think that's a victory in a sense, that you didn't lose your lone running back commit, I should say. And then Jackson Ford was heavily being pushed for by the likes of Michigan, Wisconsin, and Ohio State. So Penn State, for what it's worth, did win a pretty heavy recruiting battle there for some. This was not an easy one. An in-state player, this should be a slam dunk for Penn State. It wasn't, but they were still able to get that commitment across the finish line. So you got to give credit where credit's due. But in the state of Pennsylvania, Joey O'Brien and Grayson McHugh, and even before that, a Tyler Merrill, all went to Notre Dame. And then Penn State's secondary options, or players that they definitely would have liked to have in this class of 2026. I'm just saying, we know who the main players were. We know who the main prospects were. O'Brien was certainly one. Grayson McHugh was one of the top tackle targets in addition to Iheanacho and Kevin Brown. Those were the big three. And they go to Notre Dame. Well, not Iheanacho, but McHugh, and then Merrill, and then O'Brien. A player like Kari Adams. Well, Adams, okay, well, if they don't get O'Brien, they can at least get Kari Adams, right? They don't get Kari Adams. Okay, well, they don't get Kari Adams and they don't get Joey O'Brien, but at least they get Dorian Barney, right? Barney's from Erie, Pennsylvania originally. He transferred to a school down in Georgia. He's going to Michigan. Well, Carter Meadows, they need defensive ends in this class of 2026. At this point in time, they only have Alex Haskell and Isaac Chukura and Jackson Ford. Carter Meadows commits to Michigan. They miss out on Luke Wafel. So it's the way that Penn State lost recruiting battle after recruiting battle after recruiting battle. And why it's disappointing is because Penn State could have definitely had a top 10 class. They definitely should have, but you need context for that. Why Penn State's losing these recruiting battles, I don't think is strictly on the fact that, hey, Notre Dame was just better in its recruiting pitch. Michigan was just better in its recruiting pitch. NIL is a serious factor here. Do I think Penn State lost some of those recruiting battles to the other schools? They just made a better, recruitment. They just had a better recruitment for that prospect. Absolutely. But there was nothing that Penn State could do to sweeten the deal with NIL. Those resources are tied up with roster retention. It is expensive to bring back a quarterback, 2 running backs, defensive linemen, defensive backs that all could have gone off to the NFL. It is expensive to bring them back for their final year of eligibility. That costs money. So Penn State took a hit in the class of 2026 where maybe they shouldn't have, but that's what they went with. And I think they made the right decision. You're going after a national championship. If you win said national championship, then winning cures everything, right? So this is the gamble that Penn State's taking. They're sacrificing potentially on the immediate future to retain this nucleus, to retain this core, to do exactly what Michigan and Ohio State did in the process. So now let's pivot. What can the Nittany Lions expect next in this class of 2026, because they're not finished. They're still looking to add more prospects. I'll tell you which ones are on Penn State's radar and who could realistically commit in the next couple of weeks, over the next month. That is coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. July 5th should be a very busy day for Penn State, because they could get not one, but two commits in the same day. And at least that's the way the stars are aligning. Well, literally, truly, because there are predictions and strong predictions. This isn't just a level 6. You'll see that out of 10, where On 3 or 24/7 will put in a projection or a crystal ball. And we'll say, we're fairly confident here. I guess another team could come in at the last moment, or this recruitment's going to go down to the wire. But no, Penn State is strongly projected to land defensive end, edge defender Tyson Harley, 4-star out of the Washington, D.C. area, teammates with Emmanuel Iheanacho for what it's worth, and New Jersey area offensive tackle, listed as a consensus 3-star, but certainly another one of those players that develops properly, could end up being a very high quality player for Penn State. And that's offensive tackle Marlen Bright, listed at 6'6", 270 pounds. A true offensive tackle. There was that debate with Kevin Brown. So Penn State is in strong standing with both of them. Unless something crazy happens, and I don't foresee any of that, Penn State should get two commitments the day after the 4th of July. So there should be some delayed fireworks, if you will, for the Nittany Lions. Now, just initially, my thoughts on both of these prospects. Tyson Harley is true defensive end, listed as his huddle profile actually lists him as an outside linebacker, middle linebacker, but based on his junior season highlights, he has been playing at defensive end, hand in the dirt. Sometimes he'll be a stand-up pass rusher, but a lot of his highlights come as a pass rusher and as a true defensive end. So just to kind of clear up anything there, listed at 6'4", give or take 215, 220 pounds. This is a player that would probably need a redshirt most likely, and not a candidate to play right away. And with the recent commitment to Jackson Ford, I think Jackson Ford, I don't mean to compare and contrast players like this, but for the sake of it, for the sake of the conversation, Jackson Ford is a little more polished, a little more skilled compared to Tyson Harley. I do think that Harley is going to need that redshirt season and then maybe a couple after that to truly be an X factor for Penn State. I see Jackson Ford, again, no injuries or anything like that, I could see him making an impact sooner rather than later, maybe in year 2. Harley, on the other hand, maybe that year 3 is where he turns the corner. Again, this is based on just some observations in his high school film. He's very powerful. This is a powerful player for somebody that's 215, 220, and he's able to just push offensive tackles like it is nothing. He could maybe end up being a strong side defensive end, just the way that he plays, the tenacity, the physicality, that pure brute strength. I like seeing that from Tyson Harley, because you would expect him to be a speedy defensive end. But watching Jackson Ford play, okay, you can tell, hey, Ford a little faster here. And that's where Harley, I'd like to see maybe a quicker first step, a little better acceleration. He really relies on power moves. So I'm eager to see how his technique develops, because bull rush was a common move that Harley was using. And if it's effective, if it's not broken, don't fix it, right? Type of thing. There were other times where he was a free rush and was able to get after the quarterback. So Harley, I think, just will need a little more time for him to truly hit his potential. But I like the physicality. I like the overall strength. Like, I don't look at him and say he needs to, aside from a weight perspective, he doesn't need to hit the weight room. He doesn't need to hit the weight room because he is a weak player or he relies on speed rushing moves. No, this is a powerful player that does not quit on a play. He is going to go until after the whistle with respect to it, right? It's nothing egregious there. So I like Harley's motor, physicality, overall strength. He's definitely going to need to add some weight to play defensive end. And I would just like to see, I think his biggest obstacle will be a little more athleticism, a little more closing speed, a quicker first step, those kinds of things. But right now, smart football player, is able to read offenses very well, read an offensive tackle and what they're doing. Like I said, he doesn't hesitate. If he gets that free rush, he just goes. You will see defensive ends commonly, if they get maybe into a trap play or something like that, they will hesitate and then fall into that trap block or something like that. But Harley is aggressive from the word go. And that's what I really like about him as a prospect. As far as Marlen Bright goes, somebody that is 6'6", 270 pounds, he is able to move extremely well. And this is a player that Penn State has been recruiting for quite some time. They're going to have to fend off. They're going to end up fending off the likes of Stanford, which is actually a school that's just given them some tough recruitments that have made, and Stanford has won a couple of those in recent memory over the past few cycles. So for Penn State to get a win against the likes of Stanford, against Illinois, I think Illinois was primarily the team they needed to beat. I like that win for Penn State. On 3 is very, very high on Marlen Bright. They have him as a top 5 player in the state of New Jersey, a state that Penn State has wanted to push into more. He's a top player. He's a fringe top 200 player. So on 3 sees the potential there. But like I said, consensus 3-star. So while he does move well, I think that, you could add a little, you have a better first step, have some better footwork there. But as a Division I offensive lineman, Marlen Bright is going to be a player that is already going to have phenomenal strength and solid speed, solid athleticism, solid footwork. But you could see him, definitely add more there. But he's just able to move people, carries that frame very well. He just moves defensive ends, linebackers, anybody out of the way. Strength. You want to talk about Tyson Harley having strength. Marlen Bright, there's certainly no question marks there, but he would have to add the weight. I imagine he is it's standing at 6'6", he could maybe top out at 6'7", 6'8" by the time he's, halfway through his collegiate career. He definitely has to be over 300 pounds. This is another player that long-term, this is what Penn State's trying to do. They're trying to find these diamonds in the rough, because they don't need these players to be great right out of the gate. It would be nice, but with what Penn State has, it's particularly offensive line, but they need these players to be depth, solid contributors, part-time, and then that third year, turn the corner and use those first 2 years of development to your advantage, where there's no pressure. Maybe you get in a game here or there because of an injury or just a need at that point in time. But the outlook sets up very favorably for Tyson Harley and Marlen Bright, because you're not asking so much from them right out of the gate. So those are 2 prospects to be aware of for Penn State. Definitely, it seems like everything is leading to not 1, but 2 commitments on July 5th, the day after, that Saturday after the 4th of July. Just somebody else that's on Penn State's radar, Carter Gooden, he's kind of a tweener. We've seen that for Penn State. Isaac Chukura, Alex Haskell. Carter Gooden is a player that is 6 foot. I think he's 6'5", maybe 6'6", 250 pounds. Well, everything's going to lead to being a defensive tackle, right? Not necessarily. This is somebody that believes that he can be a strong side defensive end. Okay, you can work with that. You can never have enough strong side defensive ends, but that recruitment is going to play out a little more. I can't say whether or not Penn State would be the leader in that one, and now they're starting to get some more defensive line targets there, and they're certainly not going to stop pushing for, even though it will be difficult. They're still not going to stop pushing for a Luke Wafel or a Carter Meadows or anything like that. We'll see how everything unfolds, but a Carter Gooden is not somebody that should be looked past, and a player that Penn State would definitely want to take a commitment from. And that was the first thing I said when talking about him during his official visit. Oh, if they have a good conversation, this is a player that takes just simply on potential, whether that's a defensive end or defensive tackle. Penn State is at least in a good spot for Carter Gooden, and would be an ideal commitment with where they are in the cycle and with what defensive line commitments they already have. And that'll do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Again, thank you so much to each and every one of you for checking out the show. Friendly reminder, let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. Be a part of the conversation. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us a part of your regular routine. If you're not an everydayer, become one. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams.